welcome. This is going to be the first in a series of several video podcasts by the Dade County Medical Association, where we'll be discussing different topics related to our profession and that we as physicians do not learn about in school or in residency. During each of these videos, we're going to have a special guest speaker like we have today, where we're going to be discussing the certain particular topics. Today, we're going to be discussing about personal wealth management and any other finance questions that we may have as physicians. Here we have Mr. Jesse Frehling. Yes. He is from Altfest Personal Wealth Management. Hi, Jesse. So real quick, how are you?
Doing well. It's good to be here in Miami. Thank you so much for having me. I look forward to the discussion today.
Nice. Perfect. Yeah. Do you mind telling us a little bit about you and how you decided to get into wealth management?
Absolutely, yes. So my name is Jesse Frehling. Thank you again for the introduction. I'm the Director of Client Services at Altfest Personal Wealth Management. Our firm was founded about 40 years ago, and we have had a long-standing relationship with the healthcare community. Our founder, a person by the name of Lou Altfest, wrote for medical economics for many years, and some of the firm's earliest clients were doctors. And over time, we've grown the firm with a focus on serving the healthcare community. We're very thankful to work with a number of healthcare associations and do a lot of educational content around working with doctors. And we're really excited to now be working with the Dade County Medical Association. And I think an important vision that ties into that in terms of our work with doctors, and also Lou Altfest's founding vision for our firm, was an emphasis on objective advice. Lou founded the firm at a time, it was the early 80s, and it was the heyday of product sales. And he envisioned a firm that would not sell any products at all, but would instead provide objective advice for a transparent fee. The reason I bring that up in relation to what we do for doctors is that doctors are often big targets for product sales, especially those who are coming right out of medical school or residency and see big jumps in income. These physicians can often be targets for different companies, often financial companies, pitching their products and telling them that it's the right thing for them. And often physicians, because they just haven't learned it in medical school, aren't as financially savvy, and we see it all the time. Physicians coming through our doors with a financial product that they've purchased, in some cases have had for many years. Things can be expensive and just not in their best interest. So one thing that I always want to lead with is that our firm, we don't sell products. We're a fiduciary to our clients, which requires us legally to act in our clients' best interest. And I think that's especially important when we're working with doctors. So stop there.
All right, perfect. Yeah. Thank you so much, Jesse. So in the series of videos, the first one we're going to be discussing now is going to be for young physicians like myself. Yep. It's definitely a change once you go from your residency salary, where you're making barely minimum based off the number of hours you're working, to all of a sudden having a double or triple. What are some things for young physicians that you believe that they should be focusing on? I know a big concern that we all have as soon as we finish graduating from medical school and residency is school loans. Mm-hmm. So I guess if you don't mind touching on that as well. Sure,
absolutely. So I think to your point, I think on average, someone coming out of medical school these days has, I think in terms of the median number, it's around $200,000 in student debt, which is a big number. Mm-hmm. Our firm, we're based in New York. We have a lot of clients here in Miami, a lot of clients in New York. That number can oftentimes be much, much higher than the median of 200,000. Sometimes loans can be up into the seven figures. So it's certainly a big concern for our clients who are young physicians like yourself. And at the same time, what we focus on when we're helping young doctors is putting together a financial plan that can not only help them reduce their student loans in the most efficient way and pay those off, but also begin saving for other goals, saving for longer term goals and getting started early in doing that. Because getting that effect of long-term compounding interest when you start very young can be very, very powerful, and it can also allow you to have less of a need to save later on in your life as you start to grow, your family, for example. If that's something that you want to do, and you'll have new expenses that you didn't have before, you'll be very thankful that you also started saving as soon as you possibly could. So there are sort of a number of different things in these areas, but I guess I'll focus on the student loan sort of issue to start. I think that's certainly an important one.
Yeah, that's the major one that I think most young physicians are always thinking about. How am I going to deal with all these student loans? Like, that's something I think about as well. So I guess, how would you tell your clients, what is the best course of action when you start dealing with these student loans? Like, should you be paying the highest that you can for that specific month, or should you be paying the minimum? Should you stay with whatever government program that you're on? Because as you're doing residency, most of the time, these are all government loans that you have to pay off. Or would you recommend consolidating and refinancing? I know there's a whole lot of different questions there, but I guess, what would you recommend to start off with? What should they be doing?
Yeah, it's very much individualistic, as you were alluding to, and it's based on, I think, where you see your career evolving, whether that is in a space that you could benefit potentially, for example, from public student loan forgiveness at some point. As if you are planning on working for a nonprofit hospital, as long as you can make 120 qualifying payments over 10 years, you can get your student loans forgiven. And there are certain strategies, for instance, refinancing, that can prevent you from being able to get that forgiveness. And so you want to be careful, because certain ideas like refinancing, for example, it sounds great, especially if you have high interest loans. It's something that we often look at for clients of our firm. And the idea, of course, is that you can reduce that's very high monthly payment that we see doctors often have. But you have to consider your financial picture holistically, because if you prevent yourself from getting the loan forgiveness that you could get down the line by refinancing, then it might not be the smartest move. So certainly tailoring an individualized plan, for someone it depends on each person's specific circumstances. But I'll pause there. Is that all helpful so far?
Yeah, no, that really is. Now, I guess my question is, and you probably have to dumb it down a little bit, because like I said, we're doctors, we're smart, but financially, we're not there. So what is the difference between refinancing and consolidating loans, and when would you decide to do either option, or when should you decide to do either option? Yeah,
so when you're refinancing, the idea with refinancing is that you have higher interest loans and you want to refinance typically to get to a lower rate. Right, and that can save you a lot of money, especially if you're a little bit earlier in your career. So I would say that's when you're refinancing, you're typically taking, for example, federal loans that you might have, and refinancing with a private company to get that lower payment rate. Again, you want to be conscious of federal programs and loan forgiveness programs that you could be putting in jeopardy by doing that. But that's if you are not as concerned about getting loan forgiveness down the road, then refinancing can make a lot of sense. On the other hand, consolidation is when unlike with refinancing, the federal government doesn't allow you to consolidate private loans. But what you can do is, if you have multiple streams of federal loans, you can consolidate them and keep your public forgiveness eligibility intact, which is really important. So if you do want to stay on that track, you have a vision for being able to get student loan forgiveness in the future, but you have multiple loans out there. You're having to pay multiple different interest rates. Make things simplified. Then consolidating can make a lot of sense. You can also extend your borrowing term when you consolidate your loan as well. So it may not reduce the overall amount that you pay, but it could reduce the monthly amount that you pay through consolidation. So those are some different scenarios that you could think about.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I mean, obviously, if somebody wants to pay less every single month, then probably consolidating and bringing it down might be a little bit of a better option.
It can be.
All right. So I guess, what other we quickly talked about loans, but I guess what other things would you recommend for early physicians in regards to setting up, whether it's to do retirement, do they need disability insurance, do they need life insurance, any of those topics? So I guess let's quickly start with retirement. How should early physicians do that or start that process?
Yeah. So as I briefly mentioned before, getting started with retirement savings early is incredibly important. Mm-hmm. The amount that you would have to save to set up, I'll use air quotes here, but a comfortable retirement if you start saving in your 20s or your early 30s, as opposed to your early to mid 40s, the difference is massive. If you start much later in life, you really have to save quite a lot more on either a monthly or annual basis to catch up than if you saved much less per month, but you started much earlier, if that makes sense. Yeah. And just quickly tying back into student loans, so you saving for retirement can even help reduce your student loan payments as well by, for example, utilizing if you work at a hospital or private practice and you have a qualified retirement plan like a 403B plan or a 401k plan, contributing to these plans can reduce your taxable income. So already we're diving into almost tax planning for a second, but that can also reduce your monthly student loan payments as well. So it can have, going back to the idea of having a holistic plan that takes into consideration all of the different aspects and tying them all together to see what's overall most efficient for you is what we really focus on, with our clients. Another thing I'd mention, in addition to saving and starting saving early for young physicians, is when your income is a little bit lower, potentially earlier in your career, maximizing your what are called Roth savings can be very important as well. Very briefly, what Roth savings are, if you're thinking about either a Roth IRA or a Roth 401k, these are savings that you make on an after-tax basis, so that you don't get an upfront tax benefit like you do with pre-tax savings or traditional savings. But what you do get is you get completely tax-free growth and you get tax-free withdrawals in retirement. Now, retirement's a long way off when you're a young physician like yourself, right? So it's hard to think about the benefits of doing something like Roth contributions, but it can be incredibly impactful later in life. If you have a sizable balance in a Roth account that's going to be pulled out tax-free, I promise you're going to be very, very happy. One of the things that we often encounter with physicians who are closer to retirement is they have big balances in pre-tax retirement accounts. And that can make sense because your income, at that point might be very high and you want to reduce your taxes to the extent possible by making tax deductible contributions. But if you had the foresight in your early working years to fund big balances with Roth savings, you're going to save yourself a lot of money in taxes down the line. So I have, for instance, a lot of physicians who we work with who are in their middle of their career who were told early on to do retirement savings via Roth contributions, and they said at the time they really didn't understand the benefit. And maybe for those listening to this, the benefit doesn't quite make sense yet. If that's the case, give us a call and we can explain it to you even further. But what they realize now, even in the middle of their careers, is they've built up a substantial amount in these Roth accounts, and they know that that's going to continue to compound over time and give them a lot of tax-free income down the road. But in order to build those big balances, you have to get started early.
Yeah, I mean, though throughout residency, I actually did contribute to an IRA, Roth IRA.
Good for you.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess I got confused a little bit after I finished residency. I was making that bigger paycheck. I was told I shouldn't be putting any money in the IRA. I can get in trouble with taxes. So I kind of stopped doing that. So what do you recommend? So after residency, you're having a bigger paycheck. How do you put your money into the into the IRA.
Yeah, good point. All really good points. So you're right. If you once you hit a certain level of income, you are phased out of being able to make direct Roth IRA contributions. I think in 2023, the income limit was only $153,000. So if you're above that level, you can't make Roth IRA contributions anymore. I think this year it's up to $161,000, and then I think as a married couple this year, it's $240,000 is when you start to get phased out. Now there are a couple of different ways that you can get around that limitation. For one, if you have access to a Roth 401k, there are no income limits that apply. So those income limits aren't there for Roth 401k, so you can still make those contributions. Now, there's still a question as to whether making pre-tax versus Roth is more beneficial. If your plan allows for what are called mega backdoor Roth contributions, you can actually do both. You can maximize your tax-deductible contributions and then still contribute on a Roth basis on top of that. So there's a lot you can do. You can also do something called a backdoor Roth contribution where you make what's called
a lot.
Yeah. So basically what that is, I mentioned the mega backdoor first, which, we can dive into in more detail if it's helpful. But basically what a backdoor Roth contribution is you make a non-deductible contribution to a traditional IRA, and then you immediately move the funds to a Roth IRA. There are some pitfalls with making backdoor Roth IRA contributions, but it's certainly a strategy that's very legal. It's backdoor gives an input into some implication that it's not legal or something like that. It is. Congress has at different times indicated that they may do away with the ability to make these types of contributions. So potentially all the more reason to at least explore whether it makes sense in your situation.
Probably do it before they stop it.
Before they get rid of it.
Okay. And then I guess also for like early physicians, what would you recommend in regards to risk management? And should we get disability insurance, short disability, long disability? Do we need to get like a life insurance? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think both disability and life insurance are things that in many cases it makes sense for young physicians to have. Now, I'll pause for just a second and just state that this is often an area where physicians do get targeted by companies that are selling these policies, and we see examples where young physicians end up buying whole life insurance or permanent life insurance, same type of insurance, two different terms for it. It's not to say that whole or permanent life insurance is inappropriate in all situations. That's not true. But for certain people, because of the much higher premiums associated with these policies, it can detract from your ability to, for instance, save for retirement. And because you only have, a certain amount of dollars, right, that you can save with. So figuring out what's most efficient is important, and sometimes these types of policies can be a little expensive and maybe not that necessary. But I think so that we just wanted to make that point to start. But it is important, we think, for young physicians to have these types of insurance, especially as you're young, you're just starting to save, you haven't accumulated most likely a significant amount in assets yet, and particularly if you have a family and you want your family to have, whether it's replacing your own income or just some level of assets that they can expect and be able to support them if something should happen to you, then looking at life insurance is probably a good idea. And you can get, there's a lot of different types of life insurance policies, but often for young physicians, we do recommend term insurance. It's much cheaper than whole life, and it can provide the coverage you need. And as the name implies, it's term insurance because there's a time limit, on the policy. The reason why the purpose for term insurance is to be able to provide for expenses over a given amount of time, whether that be money to pay off a mortgage on a house, whether it be to pay for your children's college expenses. It could be a lot of different purposes for the money. But as you grow your own savings, the need for insurance could potentially decline over time, and therefore you get close to the end of the term and you may not need that insurance. You may not need to pay for it anymore. I'll switch to disability briefly if that sounds good. So I think disability is also one of those areas for young physicians that's really important to take a look at. And a certain amount, your employer may offer a certain level of disability insurance. Oftentimes, what we based on our review of these policies is that it's not quite enough, and purchasing your own individually held disability insurance policy could be really important. Just in terms of the monthly payment that you would be able to expect should you become disabled. So I think a couple of really important things to think about with disability insurance is one, particularly with doctors, making sure that you get a true own occupation disability policy is important because basically what that means is should you become disabled and you don't have the ability to perform your specific specialty or profession, then you'll be able to get those payments.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. So we're going to be moving on to more mid-career fit. What is your recommendation when you start dealing with clients who are mid-career? They didn't really start off with anything initially. Like they were like, oh, great, I'm making all this money, and they just decide to start spending it. But then now they're thinking about retirement and, should I have been investing in it? What do I do now? How do I start investing in it? What are your recommendations for that?
Yeah, I think, as you said, you get to the middle of your career and all of a sudden retirement doesn't feel quite as far away. And so starting to do some preliminary analysis around, based on what you have now and what you're able to save, and assuming a certain rate of growth on the assets that you've already built up and what that could potentially be when it comes time to retire, and looking at what your projected income, could be at that time from different sources, including not just your investment portfolio, but also Social Security. If you expect to receive any inheritances in the future, or if you have access to some kind of a pension. Understanding, what your lifestyle could potentially be at that point in retirement. And while you still have a lot of time potentially towards retirement because you're just in the middle of your career, making those adjustments to your savings habits at that point is going to become, much more, important. In addition, by the time you're in the middle of your career, managing the investments themselves becomes a lot more important. And that's something our firm focuses on a lot as well. Now, when you're just starting to save earlier in your career, putting everything within, for example, a target retirement fund, which is a very popular investment vehicle within a 401k or 403b plan, can make sense. And it's an easy way to get, build a diversified portfolio. But as you get older, it makes a lot of sense to try to customize your investment plan more to your specific needs. For instance, many of the doctors that we work with want to retire earlier than sort of like the average American, so to speak. And so how can they put together a portfolio that will allow them to effectively do that? How much do they need to save if they want to retire, say in their 50s instead of in their 70s, right? Yeah. And what could they realistically expect as a lifestyle? So again, because managing the investments toward that specific unique goal that you have becomes much more important.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I guess in regards to like investing, a lot of people also say, oh, you should probably invest in real estate, or you should invest in stocks. Like, what is your take on doctors investing in these kind of different sections?
Yeah, we believe strongly in diversification when it comes to investing. And so you mentioned a couple of different, quote unquote, asset classes, one being stocks, another, real estate, which almost falls under the umbrella of alternative investments. And then a third would be a common one, a third common asset class is bonds, right? Fixed income, which you can think of most typically as the more conservative part of your portfolio. And it's important, we think, to have representation in all of these asset classes to maintain diversification. And it's also important to not have too much in sort of a single basket. So sometimes we'll speak with doctors who are coming and speaking to our firm for the first time, and they tell us about all the different real estate that they own. And one potential issue there is just liquidity, around those properties. Another is just sort of when you have all your eggs in one or two baskets, markets, if that basket has a period that it doesn't perform very well, that it could really impact your overall financial trajectory. So, at different times we will favor certain asset classes over the other, but we generally recommend having that diversified exposure to both, stocks, bonds, and alternatives, including real estate.
Okay.
So,
and that's basically just creating your entire investment portfolio is what they'll call it.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. And rebalancing it over time. So when you do have investments, like your real estate holdings or like your stocks that perform very well in certain areas over time, continuously rebalancing the portfolio to your target asset allocation to make sure that, again, that one area doesn't become too outsized of a weight in your portfolio. That's really important.
Okay. And then I guess just going back to, I had this question that one of the other doctors had asked me because I had told her I was coming on to the show. What would you recommend as a better investment, real estate investment versus doing stocks?
It's a good question, and there may not be a clear answer. Interestingly enough, we operate at our firm our own real estate fund actually as well. So but it's a very specific type of real estate investing. There's many different types of real estate, commercial, residential, multifamily, right? And they all have their own unique trends. So saying that, giving you an answer as to what is better depends on the timing, I think, as well of where those markets are at any point in time. What we would suggest is that both can be very good investments. The stock market over time has returned around 8%, per year since its inception. It's traditionally thought of as a way for most people to be able to provide consistent returns over time and build your savings, and also do so in a way where the money is liquid and you don't have to worry about that illiquidity aspect that real estate brings into play. That being said, again, we have our own private real estate fund, and we think it's really compelling. And certain times when we think stocks are really expensive, we'll recommend to our clients we want to have more in real estate today because we think there are better returns there. So again, the timing and the value, of each of those areas is really important when determining what you think is going to provide a better return.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all right, Jesse, so thank you so much for coming onto the show and having us talk real quick. I do have just one more question for you. What is the one thing that you would recommend for all clients when they're looking for a financial advisor? What is the one thing that they should focus on?
I think it's one, but it's partly two, but they relate to each other. I think going back to what I mentioned at the top of our chat here is working with an advisor who is going to act in your best interest as a fiduciary, I think is really important. And part of that is related to the fact of when they're making a recommendation to you with regard to your life insurance or your disability, or if you're later in your career, long-term care, or anything where a product sale is involved, that the advisor doesn't have an axe to grind, that they're not going to get paid more if you buy this policy, for example. You want to work with someone who's in your best interest and be able to provide you with the expertise in that area, but not have a conflict of interest in that area. And I think it ties into just one quick other thing would be if you can work with an advisor that has different specialists on his or her team in different areas, from insurance to taxes to estate planning, which becomes very important to many of our physician clients, to asset protection. These are all areas, and there are many, many more, of course, but these are major areas that often tie into a physician's financial life, and you really want to be working with someone we think who can tie them all together and help you make decisions with the full picture in mind.
All right. Thank you again, Jesse. So this concludes our podcast for the day. Please go ahead and keep following along on the Dade County Medical Association YouTube channel. We're going to have a bunch of these videos popping up with a bunch of different topics. So just go and keep your eye out. I also want to thank the Atlantis University for helping us get this set up and do this web video podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, thank you.